Hi everyone, Joshua here. I know this video is a bit different than what I usually upload. What can I say? I contain multitudes. I do want to get back into the cooking tutorials soon, but for the last several months, all of my creative energy has been in finishing up a really big project of mine. I've released my first video game. It's called Alcyone: The Last City. It's an interactive sci-fi novel set in the last city in the universe after experiments with faster than light travel ended up breaking reality. I'm very proud of it, so if you like interactive narratives and books that you can play, you should definitely check it out. I'll put a link in the description. Now that the game has been released, I've been able to work on some other creative ideas and side projects for the first time in a while. I've always really wanted to get a 3D printer. I watch YouTube videos about all of the really awesome, amazing things that people can make with them, and I feel covetous. But I was worried that it would be something I would spend hundreds of dollars on, and it would kind of just get used once or twice and then sit in the corner and I would never touch it again. But I did it. I bit the bullet. I took the financial risk that I've just spent lots of money on a big paperweight. But luckily, after having one for about 2 months now, I played around with it and I made some really awesome things, and I've learned a whole lot about how they work. This has led me to my first really big project with the 3D printer. What if I make my own bag? Having some fun with the autofocus on the camera. Sorry if I'm blurry. For many years, I've had this beautiful and incredibly expensive small leather bag from Mont Blanc. I love this thing. It's been my primary bag for ages, but it's on the small side, and these days, my idea of everyday carry would make a Boy Scout feel unprepared. Everyone mocks me. Everyone says I pack overboard, but then you're 2 hours into rural Australia and hit a rock, and the car's front fender has come off, and everyone is grateful for the passenger who has industrial strength duct tape and portable scissors. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, because of the size issues, I switched the beautiful leather bag to a drawstring bag that I bought from Crumpler years ago. It's pretty nifty. It does this cool thing where it can convert into a crossbody bag, but it's more practical than nice to look at. And personally, I also really don't like wearing backpacks. They remind me of junior high school. Enter the 3D printer. It occurred to me that it was probably within my wheelhouse to model up something that is slightly larger than the bag that I use all the time, but bespoke and specific to me and what I like to carry, so it will suit my needs. I could also design something that would look a little bit more interesting than the drawstring bag, but is hopefully just as functional. I have actually attempted to do something like this in the past with sewing and fabric, and I got a decent enough prototype, but my sewing talents are very mid, as the kids would say. I know 3D modeling, I'm in video game development after all, but it's not my go-to skill, and it's not something that I've done in quite a long time. Shout out to the little alien dude I sold in Second Life almost 15 years ago, apparently. And for some reason, that little alien wants to steal the camera's focus. Anyway, 3D modeling. I had to relearn how to use Blender, which has gone through apparently 2 major releases since the last time I touched it. Should I have done this in actual CAD software instead? Yes, I should have. I tried learning Fusion 360. I made some progress with it, but I'm not an engineer. It's really an unpleasant piece of software to get your head around, especially for someone whose 3D modeling experience has only ever been for digital stuff. I would have eventually figured it out, but I decided it was better to stick with what I already had some knowledge of instead of trying to force myself to learn a new piece of software and waste my time on that. I knew the rough idea of what I wanted to make: a 2-tiered bag with a small compartment and a main compartment. The small compartment should be accessible from the front, and the main compartment would have 2 access points, also through the front of the bag, but as well as the top. Once the muscle memory of using Blender came back to me, I started modeling stuff out. From the dimensions of the bag itself, I had a rough idea of the size that I wanted: about 26 centimeters tall, 11 centimeters deep, and 22 centimeters wide. For structural stability, I decided that I was gonna make all of the walls of the geometry 6 millimeters thick, and I kept that a uniform and consistent dimension across the board. My first big challenge was figuring out how to make the ingress points of the bag work, the doors that I had decided to do in the front. I had a hinged idea in mind basically from the beginning, but turning that into something physical was the first thing that I ran up against that confirmed that I have no innate genetic ability to engineer things. I tried a ball and pin sort of mechanism where the door could be snapped in place and could then turn on that. But the pins didn't feel like they were going to be sturdy enough if I printed them small, and if I made them any bigger, then the door actually wouldn't snap into place. I thought about external metal rods that I could then hammer into the base to connect both pieces together, but I didn't like the idea of that and found that adding the hole to accommodate it was affecting the overall strength of the connecting walls. It may shock you, but 6mm is not a lot of width to play with. Eventually, I worked out a way to do a print-in-place hinge where the door and the base would be printed at the same time. This made the hinge that the door pivots on part of the base's geometry, so it was one solid piece that could make everything stronger and more stable, hopefully. With that out of the way, everything else was mostly easy to figure out. I had another challenge with how the geometry of the smaller storage unit would connect with the larger one. The way that 3D printers work is they build geometry up one layer at a time. In the case of FDM printers like the one that I bought, resin printers are an entirely different beast. This is printed from the bottom up. The printer can't print anything in midair, obviously, so I had to make sure that my model's interlocking pieces were made in such a way that it didn't have floating geometry. You can add support structures in the print software that you then break away after it's done, but that's extra filament waste and leaves little scars on the final print where the supports get torn away. It looks really ugly, and I wanted to have minimal cleanup on the model afterward. I settled on making these little cutouts that function kind of like teeth, where the three parts, the top of the lower walls, the middle layer, which itself is the bottom of the main storage unit or the roof of the small one, and the bottom of the upper walls all meet together in a way that ensures that there's contact on all sides and all three parts are held in place. I repeated this idea everywhere else that walls had to join together. In theory, I wanted this to all be non-destructive. I wanted it to be relatively easy to replace a wall or a hinge if I need to in the future without having to reprint the entire bag. But I learned very quickly, once I started putting things together, that the zero tolerances that I'd given all of the walls worked amazingly to connect all of the pieces without needing any kind of glue or adhesive. But yeah, this thing is not going to come apart again. I modeled the top storage doors so that they would meet together in the middle, modeled out a removable lid, added in some teeth so that the doors have somewhere to slot into when they're closed, and then I had enough of it together to print out and put together my first prototype, a big pink box. The first thing I realized once I had a physical thing to hold is that somehow, even though I'd started off with the right dimensions, the bag somehow grew. The prototype is about 30 centimeters tall, which might not seem very high, but when I was trying to make something as small as possible that still manages to hold all of the things that I want to carry, I don't want it to be very big. So I went back to reprint all of the parts at a 95% scale instead, and I found that this was much closer to the size that I want for the final bag. I realized from the prototype that I need to come up with a mechanism to keep the doors actually held shut once they're closed, because it's obvious that once I have things in the bag rattling around, they're gonna bump up against the walls and force them open. And I don't want my things falling out on the street while I'm walking around. So I redesigned the nubs that slot into the front of the doors that I was using to open and close them, and added a little hole that a latch can go through. I had to tweak the geometry of the latch a little until I had something that was just big enough to fit through all of the holes, but still flexible enough that I can unlatch it when I want to open up those components. In keeping with the theme of modularity, I decided to add some accent panels that I could print in different color filaments and snap into the side and the back. I decided to print the bag in black filament, and for some reason this very awesome neon green lime color was speaking to me, so that became the accent color. I designed a strap mechanism that I could fit a strap through to actually wear the bag. I'd bought some narrow fabric for this purpose, but when it finally came time to do the sewing, I realized that I'd already had some sort of seatbelt kind of material that I thought fit the aesthetic of the bag much better. This must have been a leftover from when I tried to do this in cloth and with the sewing machine. I expected the sewing to be its own challenge based on my past experiences with the sewing machine, but this actually was the easiest part. I'd also bought a plastic strap adjuster, but then I realized, hey, this is a very simple part. I can just make it myself. So I did that, printed it in the accent color, and went on my way. At the last minute, I decided instead of printing a back panel in the accent color, I would add a secret little pocket that I can use to stick my iPad into, so it will sit flush against my back when I'm wearing the bag. Otherwise, the bag is too small to put the iPad in. I printed out a thicker bit of geometry and added that to the model, and the last thing to decide on was the lid piece. I'm extremely proud of it. It's 3 components that fit together and lock to make one bit. I printed the hexagon grid, the official shape of science fiction. In the green filament, it looks so cool. When the last piece came out of the printer at 3 a.m. today, I was very chuffed with myself. That's basically it, aside from a last minute print of a clip to keep the bag strap tidy. Here's my little craft area. Yeah, I've also gotten into polymer clay, but then here's where the magic is happening. I've also got to the point where I'm using the 3D printer to print components for the 3D printer. Printception! I don't have time-lapse footage from anything that I printed because I didn't think to make this into a video until I was nearly done with the bag and decided that photos alone were not going to do it justice. And here, after about a month of modeling, iterating, and printing, is the final creation. I'm very proud of it. Doors open. Storage, storage, storage. The latch has a very satisfying slot. It was picking up an entirely new set of skills that I didn't have a couple months ago. I learned so much in the process about manufacturing, about how 3D printers work, about why people go to school for this. But I managed to make something that's unique, one of a kind, just for me, and exactly what I need. It looks incredibly professional. If I saw this on a shelf at a shop, I would be intrigued. I would not have thought that someone printed this at home. It genuinely does not look like I made it myself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment, like, subscribe. I don't know what I'll do on this channel anymore. I'd like to do more creative things like this, not necessarily cooking related, because I like to work on a lot of different projects and I like to make a lot of different things. And it'd be nice to get the energy to start recording some of that and maybe intentionally share that with people outside of just posting it on social media. Thank you as always, and I'll see you next time.